All right. So you met your birth mom.
Mm-hmm.
You spent how many? 3 days down
3 days.
So, did you spend time with her every single day?
Every single day. I spent, of course, Toger got home back to Lakeland later that evening. It was about 8 or 9 o'clock, and Peggy, who was my half-sister from Toger's second marriage, called over my biological mom's house and said, Toger's here. So me and Raymond got in the car and drove over there. And I told you it was, Mom lived about 2 blocks away from Toger. It was actually about 2 miles.
Okay.
But she lived close to him. Let's just put it that way. Went over there and I talked with Toger. And, of course, everybody was there. I mean, the house was crowded. The long-lost son has found his way back to the nest. But Toger told me right there in front of everybody, he says, well, he says, you could call me Daddy if you want to, but I'll just tell you, son, I'm not your father. And he told me a little bit about Mom getting pregnant and Mom leaving him. And he told me, he says, I wasn't a nice man to your mother. I was a big bear. And he said, I did things I shouldn't have done. And he says, I ruled the roost. And at the time when your mother left me, I was living with my parents in this very same house you're sitting in. And Toger's parents were deceased at the time. But the man was very cordial, very open. And he said, I didn't want to be holed up with 3 kids and a woman that, well, a damn Yankee, as he put it. And he said, you've got 2 brothers and you've got a sister. He says, and I don't know where you came from, and I really don't want to know. But if you want to call me Daddy, that's fine. If you want to call me Toger, that's fine. But he says, you asked the question, I told you. I'm really not your father. And I accepted that. I really did. And I asked him, I said, do you know who my father might be? And he says, I ain't got a clue. You need to ask your mother that. Well, I had already asked my mom. She tried to convince me that Toger Page was my father. Well, like I said, we spent 3 days there. I talked with Toger a couple times before we left. I spent most of the time with my mom, getting to know some of my cousins and my half-sisters. And I hadn't got to meet my brothers yet. Had met Millie one time. And me and Millie, we hit it off very good. I mean, she was happy that here I was. When we left that about noontime that day, head back to Virginia, me and Raymond, I thought about a lot of things that I'd heard, things that was shared with me. And they invited me back. They hoped that I would come back. And I told them, I will come back. I have a very unique job. I'm going to college right now. And this was just a courtesy call to come down and meet you guys. And when I come back down, I'll call you. There's many things I want to know. And my job is right now quite important. And I'm working and going to college at the same time. And I didn't go into schematics or any terminology to go over their head who I was working for. I just told them I worked for the government. That's all they needed to know. They knew I had been in the military, so they assumed I was still working with the military in some format. But the ride back to Virginia, me and Raymond discussed, because Raymond was there the whole time listening to all of this testimony. And Raymond told me, he says, you're probably not going to find your birth certificate. Well, that was the first time the birth certificate had crossed my mind, because Raymond brought it up. So when we got back, the early morning hours, again, I don't remember the exact date. I mean, I was between semesters when I went down, and when I had to be back within 4 days because we were going overseas again on a field trip. When I got back that morning, Raymond dropped me off at my house. I went in. Kathy was asleep. I woke her up. She was excited I was home. And I told her, I said, next time I go to Florida, would you like to go? You got to remember, this was 1983, and Kathy was about 8 months pregnant with our first child. So I think I had got down there about, it was probably around April of 1983 when I got there and met my mom for the first time. Somewhere between the end of March, 1st of April. And Kathy said, yeah, she says, I'm doing good and everything. But anyway, went back overseas. We went to South America on this time. Or no, I'll take it back. We went back to Israel, excuse me. And we were going to, while we were in Israel, we were going to visit Egypt also. See the Great Pyramids and stuff. But the flight there to the Middle East, I talked with Giles, and Giles was talking to me how my visit with my mom go, and I says, I wonder if I can see my birth certificate. And Giles plainly told me, he says, your birth certificate is sealed. He says, I doubt any of you guys will ever get to see that birth certificate. I said, why? He says, well, he says, because there's some things on that birth certificate that has been noted that we can't tell the public. And I said, what things? He says, well, how big you guys was, what we knew about you guys. And I said, well, how did you know all about us? He said, well, through the churches and some studies that you guys are doing for us. And he says, you'll come across these things. You'll see them, you'll see them. And when you see them, you let me know you found them. Well, within a few years, let's say about 2 years, 2.5 at the most, these testaments about us would come to light. Whoa. And then we would get a visit from the Catholic Church. Now, the Catholic Church would get in and really fill in the pieces.
So the Catholic Church came to the agency?
They were invited by the agency. They wanted their senior genealogy expert to come to Langley, Virginia. And this would be around the end of 1985 when Bishop Micah Kalani would come to Langley, Virginia and become part of Project Zingo within the agency. And he sat with us, talked with us, and filled in a lot of blank questions we had. During this time, it was around the end of 83, they started taking us in under hypnotherapy. Giles being the senior hypnotherapist there. Giles started regressing me. And some of the things that Giles was seeing and making note of was quite enlightening. Now, how they did the hypnotherapy, you got to remember, there was 33 of us. Okay, this week, we're going to take 5 or 6 of you. You're going to go with the hypnotherapist and the administrator who will take the notes. And all this is going to be recorded. It's going to be filmed. We're going to put you under hypnosis, and we're going to monitor your breathing, your pulse rate, your heartbeat, brain waves. I mean, it was like we were lab rats at one point. They were putting us up. And I mean, when I was hypnotized the very first time, I mean, they put things on my brain, monitored my heart. And in the early stages, the hypnosis lasted anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes, maybe 45, less than an hour. But as we uncovered things, they were breaking us down to only about 7 or 8 of us, maybe 9 were getting what they call extra hypnotherapy. And with that, they were bringing in psychologists to view the hypnosis regressions. And out of these groups, these individuals that we have now pinpointed are exposing some really serious information. Well, with me, not only was I talking about creation and things that I was seeing that was noted thousands of years ago through our discoveries with the cuneiforms, but we also were filling in some things that nobody knew, like dates, the war that came out of the heavens, what was going to happen in the future, who this being, Afra Anu, was.
And who is Afra Anu?
My father, Jehovah.
So God.
Father. Because even he doesn't like the word God.
So, when Giles would put you under, after the session, would he share with you, or were you able to view
No,
the
not
tapes?
Not at first. But after they had had several hours of film footage on all of us, and I was selected to be within the next sessions of a special selected group. After each session, Giles said, "Would you like to watch it? We have an hour and 10 minutes of you." Yeah, I'd watch it. And it was moving. Eddie, do you remember saying these things? No. Do you remember writing down this, what you are calling angelic writing, remote viewing? Do you remember that? No. Have you ever done this before? And I stunned him when I was asked that question. Yeah, a long time ago, I used to write these things down to teach people. And I've got just about all of my angelic writings here today with me. Because when I left the agency, I took a lot of the stuff that was mine. It belonged to nobody else. And it's not going to be shown to nobody else unless we decide we want to show it. And I have shared it with people. I have been stingy. I have shared it with the people that, let's say, that come across my path or I search out. And I've been very tenacious over the years. I have searched out some people and found them. And then I've had, on the vice versa, I've had people look for me. And if I wanted to be found, here I am. The knowledge that they were looking for was phenomenal. Ronald Reagan was just stunned by what he was hearing. The doctors, the psychologists, and the psychiatrists, and the medical biologists, they were stunned at what they were seeing and finding. Oh, yes.
So what were they hearing, and what were they seeing and finding?
Like me and Michael and Daniel and Victoria, David, Richard, Walt, Matt, Angel, Beth, we were all talking pretty close to the same language and the same historical documentation of events that happened thousands of years ago. If you'll look in this area, you'll find this right here. If you'll look over here, you'll find remains of the Nephilim. If you'll look over here, there's a pyramid over here. There's a temple over here. They were all destroyed by the beings that came down to annihilate the human species. And they didn't know about these things. You want to spend extra money and go look at it? Yeah, so they'd go over there. Holy cow. We have found it. You need to get over here. You need to send a team over here. They may be in Central America. They may be over in the Middle East. Maybe in India. But how did we know these places existed? Unless we had been there before. And then it came down to terminology that these beings have walked Earth thousands of years ago. These beings are the reincarnation of, as the Catholic Church is telling us, the golden angels. Who are the golden angels? They are the seed of Jabba. They are the seed of the creators. And as we showed these things, some of the people within the agency was really getting scared. I mean, we had nicknames. They called us the Children of the Corn. They called us the Spook Squad. There's that group of aliens. This was just a little bit of wordage that went within Project Aquarius. And eventually, the people within the unit, especially with the agency, they stayed clear of us. They were actually getting scared because the rumor mill, this is supposed to be such a top secret, clamped up, don't tell nothing beyond these walls to anybody. But the wordage was leaking out here and leaking out there. Nothing was foolproof.
How did that make you feel when people became scared of you?
I just, I didn't really give it much thought at the time. I had a beautiful wife. I had a beautiful baby girl now. And my focus was on my job. Yeah, okay. The government's going to get their bang for their buck. I'm not going to hide nothing from them, what I find. But my number one focus was with Kathy and Heather. There was my daughter, my first daughter. And I could look in my daughter's eyes and I could see me. Not only could I look in my daughter's eyes, but I could also see my bloodline ran right through her veins. And little did she know, the world has received another princess. Another princess. Oh. Doing exactly what my father told me not to do.
And what was that your father told you not to do?
Well, as we get into it, I think we might want to start now talking about what happened in Vietnam, because during one of these regression sessions, Giles found out what happened in Vietnam. But my father had told me, I was appalled at what you have became. No son of mine shall do the bidding of man. But you're going to go back. You are going to go back. And I want you to see what the world is all about. I want you to see what this war is all about. Taste mankind. Feel mankind. And see the wickedness and the nastiness that it's going to give you. Yes, you. Go back. Experience it firsthand.
Well, I think we should.
And then you'll understand who I am and who you are. But you remember this before you leave, my son. He called me his son. Not just once, but several times. I never want you to have a wedding, never get married, and thusly never have children. And I think during that time period, my father knew exactly what I was going to do. Exactly. What son doesn't challenge his father? And, I'll tell you about what happened in Vietnam, because they would find out about it. About 1985 is when it all came to light. It all came to light. And as you remember, I told you they selected a few of us.
Right.
Well, as they're selecting, Giles, Gerald Ford, and them wanted to know exactly what happened in Vietnam in 1973. For them 11 days it was missing, and it stunned them. This is where things really started coming spooky. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh. I'm going to stop this tape, and then we'll start again, and then we'll go into what happened. Okay. Okay. So, do you want to tell me about Giles putting you under and then you finding out about Vietnam.
Are we rolling?
Yes, we're rolling.
Be about the end of 1985. 1985. Giles brought me in early morning. It was about, I would say, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. This was already pre-planned. And I didn't know who all was going to be there. But Giles told me, he says, Eddie, we're going to be doing a little bit longer regression today than we have been. And he says, we're going to go to the procedure, we're going to hook you up with the monitors, and we've got some guests that's going to watch you today. Is that be okay? I said, sure, why not? Let's go for it. So they hooked me up. It only took about 20, 30 minutes to get everything hooked up because you get relaxed. Wasn't allowed to drink no coffee, which was probably the most difficult thing about it. I love my coffee in the morning. They got me all hooked up, and I got in my chair. They had a specific chair they put me in. Had my ankle monitors and monitor all my pulse and everything from head to toe. Giles put me under, and he used to say I was the most easiest person to hypnotize he had ever seen. Well, one of the thing come in and he says, Eddie, we're going to go back to the time you was in Vietnam. Can you tell us what happened on June 14th, 1973? Can you take us back to that time period? And I took him back to that time period. The battle, my helicopter being shot, my Marine brother, K.D. Williams, getting killed, and me inside that tree, and I knew this was it. I was going to die inside this tree. But suddenly there was a warmth. I felt a warmth. I couldn't visually see with my eyes, but I could physically see that there was 3 beings over here, there was 2 down here, and there was 3 over here, and there was a much larger one standing right here, and he would come over, and remember he touched the side of this tank, this vat I was on, and he put his hand there, and I put my hand, and I felt such warmth and compassion. Never saw his face, but I could see something like a smile. And then this vat, it was a kind of a yellowish liquid, and I just kind of floated in it, but I could breathe. And I remember that they took me out of it, and then they didn't just reach down and lift me out. No, I was kind of just drawn out and sat down on a table, and I remember something came over on top of me. It was like a chest plate, and I felt such warmth, but there was a little bit of a stinging to it. And I remember this one woman coming up and rubbing my hair, and she kept doing like this on me, and she was talking to me. I couldn't see her lips moving, but I knew she was talking to me. She says, my brother, you're okay now. We have saved you. But the next 2 hours are going to be so critical to your survival, and I will not leave your side. I didn't know who this woman was. I knew she was beautiful, and she called me her brother. Okay. Well, I remember they took me to this small cubicle. When I called it a cubicle, it was like a room. And they laid me down, and I was covered up with a blanket. And it was kind of cold in there. I mean, not deathly freezing, but it was cold. And I had no clothes, but I had this little small blanket, but I was warm. And I just kind of just drifted off, and my mind was kind of like floated a little bit and floated, and I wasn't thinking of anything particular. My mind wouldn't let me think of anything particular. I couldn't focus on one item. I didn't know who I was at the time. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what had happened to me. I didn't even think about Vietnam. I didn't even have no recollection of Vietnam. But it wasn't long after that. And I don't know how many hours. It could have been 3 hours. It could have been 30 hours. But I remember that same girl come back in and said, and now as I'm talking, her and I were talking. Our lips are moving. She talked to me in a very strange dialect, but I knew exactly what she was saying, and I was able to speak that same dialect back to her. And she says, "Our father will be here very soon. He's been so worried about you." And I remember, "Who is my father?" She says, "He's Opera." "Oh, okay. He'll be here soon." And she says, "Stay here until he comes." And she left. And it wasn't, I don't know, it could have been 1 minute, it could have been 10 minutes, it could have been 10 hours. And this magnificent being walked in. Now, when I say magnificent, he was large. He looked like bronze. I mean, you just only see things like this in a dream. But here it wasn't really. And he come in and he says, "My son." And I looked at him and, "You're a child. This is my daddy." I felt at peace. I felt compassion. I felt love. And he came over and hugged me. And he says, "You feel better today?" Now he's talking with me with his mind, and I'm answering with my mind. And I said, "I feel so good today." I said, "Where am I at?" He's, "Oh, you're with me today." He says, "Come, let's walk." And I got up, and I had no shame. I had no clothes on. I remember, I had no clothes on. And he says, "It is okay. Dress, if you so be." And I got up and I dressed. There were some clothes there, and I put on this kind of like a white outfit, because he had on a white outfit, and he had like it was like a robe or something, or a cape. But this cape was, I can't describe it. It glittered. It shined. And the colors, I can't even describe the colors. The colors were just unbelievable. And we walked and we walked. And he said, "This is what we brought you here upon." He said, "This is a craft, a ship from our world." And I said, "Wow, this thing, it was huge. Massive windows, and you could look out and see certain, like, gardens. Look out, and there was people walking on the other side, and there was like a little water stream. Now I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I don't know what had happened. I was alive. I was breathing. I was walking. What happened hours ago, or days ago, or weeks ago, I don't know. But here I was, and he was talking to me about our home. He says, "In time you'll get to come home, but you've been down there for a while now, and I want you to learn things, and I want you to do things for me, because this is who you are. I am your father, and I created you. You came from my seed, and don't worry about certain elements of life down there. Stay away from these elements here, and I want you to pay particular attention on these elements." And when he's talking about elements, stay away from alcohol, stay away from drugs. Don't mess with this group of people because they're wicked. I want you to concentrate on this group of people because they're unintelligent. They don't know who I am, or who you are, or what the world is all about. But you are going to be there to teach them. You're going to be there to share my message to them. and you hold a very special key. There will be brothers and sisters. I mean, these conversations were intense, and they were so beautiful. And suddenly he looked at me and he says, I'm really proud of you. Really proud of you. But I'm also very disturbed with you. I'm really appalled by what you have done for man. For no son of mine shall ever do man